presentation here. For tonight's discussion, I'll tell you a little bit about me and my experience with blogging, and we'll define what is a blog, and then we'll go over the do's and don'ts for about 20 minutes, and then at the end, when we wrap up at about 8:30, we'll have 5 minutes for questions and answers and maybe a little bit of discussion. And it'd be great if, for this next 20 minutes or so, I can just go through the presentation, get the information out there, and then we pause at the end to ask questions. So maybe write down, you could write down some notes as we go through the presentation that you can refer back to during the question portion. So appreciate that. And that what I think you can take away from this presentation is how to think about how blogging, particularly guest blogging, and I'll talk a little bit about what guest blogging means, can market your brand, so your personal brand or your business brand, and that in this review, get some actionable tips, and then get some clear next steps to use blogging for your business. So about me, I am the marketing manager at Coursera, which is a website that has open online courses from some of the world's top universities for anyone to take for free. We have over 11 million users. I've been coding for about 12 years, and my entire career has been in the tech industry. And I've blogged for businesses with readership into the tens of millions. You might have heard of some of these websites, Monster.com, Stumble Upon Coursera, amongst others. And I have my LinkedIn profile there. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn and connect, I'd love to do that. So let's define blog really quickly. What is a blog? A blog is a standalone website on which individuals publish brief editorial articles, and that's what we call posts. So during the presentation today, when you hear me refer to a post, that means that it is the piece of content that you've put on your blog. And usually blogs are in reverse chronological order. So when someone comes to your blog, they'll see the most recent post first and then go backwards in time. Blogs are informational, conversational, and they usually just cover one topic or a niche subject matter. Let's look at an example. So you have Google, right? And there's the business of Google, and the website and the URL, you can see google.com, versus they have their blog, which is on a completely different site, and it is meant to, again, be more informational, conversational, and it's going to have more content that is related to the brand and to give it sort of a voice and a perspective. And so looking at an example post from the Google blog, this post that they put up is directly related to their business and that they from their business, but that they are speaking to a topic that is perhaps peripheral to their business, but is topical and interesting. And it's going to add value to the business brand. But then where are they going to put this content, right? They can't just put it on their homepage. I think that would then distract people from using their core product, and it adds an emotional connection to the brand and to Google. So this example is if you saw the meme of the white and gold dress versus the black and blue dress, which I thought was really funny. So let's get into the do's and don'ts. First, let's understand what blog-based marketing is and what it can do for you, and also what it doesn't do. So use a blog to identify your brand with a voice, an angle, or a perspective. And it allows you to speak to and engage with a target market, and it gives you a place to put content like that Google post that we just saw to promote via your marketing channels. So you can use the blog or use posts on a blog to then put on social media, to put in email marketing, where you might want to, initially you might think, all I have is my website with my business, all I have are products to sell, and I'm just going to be linking over the same thing over and over again. But that by having these posts on a blog, it gives you something else to work with that's really meaty, and it adds a lot of value to what you're putting out there, and people will get excited about what you're putting out there, and it's not just going to be repetitive. What blogs don't do. So don't think that if you just put a blog out there, put a post up there, thousands of people are going to come and it's going to be great, right? You have to promote your content. And you have to have others help you promote, have your network promote. And I'll get into promotion a little bit later in the presentation. But if you just kind of put it out there, and even if you do promote it on your channels, you might only see a few people or in the dozens to start. But that's okay. You got to start somewhere. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And also, those few to dozen people will be really engaged and have that emotional connection to your brand. But also don't think necessarily that 100% of the traffic that goes to your blog is going to go directly to your business. Blogs are about branding, exposure, providing that voice and that extra place for content and a different angle. And that if it's a healthy blog, you will probably see 5 to 10% direct conversion of people going from your blog to your business website. And hopefully from there, then you'll need to look at the conversion numbers of how your business website performs. But usually with blogs, when people come from the blog to the business website, where I've seen historically, there's higher conversion on your key performance indicators, or what your objectives are actually on your site, than if somebody just kind of randomly comes via other channels. So blogs are good for that. And that client conversion, though, is usually going to happen off of the blog, but that if there's a way to track or see, even with some light market research around how people that are engaged with your blog are more engaged with your website. They come back to your website. It's top of mind versus if you didn't have that content out there. So let's look at Google's blog again. So their tagline, insights from Googlers into our products, technology, and the Google culture. So you can see here that it's not just about this is what our business does. It's also about the technology, about culture. They go into interesting things besides, let's say, just what this example is, which is data. So here's an example from one of the blogs that I work with, which is the company that I work at now, Coursera, and we do a learner story series. So as I mentioned, it's a website that has college courses on it, and by featuring learners with images and their direct quotes and their testimonials, we add personality to a business that's very academic. And when people come to our business website, we want them to be thinking about, what course do I want to join? We don't want to distract them with a bunch of peripheral information, but that, let's say they're already in a course. How do we keep them motivated, right? How do we help learners relate to somebody like them and find motivation to complete the course? And that's why we feature learner stories. So do's and don'ts. Number 2, outlining your goals and audience and what's possible for you with blogging. So outlining your goals, what are your objectives? Make quantitative goals, qualitative goals, short-term goals, long-term goals. And these don't have to be super intense, and they can be flexible, but it gives you a place to start so that you can start envisioning what you want. And so an example I put up here would be to drive 100 more visits to my website each month. And that I want my posts that I put on a blog to be the #1 result in Google by a certain time frame, right? And then a more qualitative goal might be to align my personal brand as an expert for women in the field of marketing. And so think through, what would Google's goals be? If Google was a small business, what would their goals be with a blog? And now that Google is a household name, what are their goals today? And think about what their quantitative, qualitative, short-term, and long-term goals are. And then outline your audience concurrently with what your goals are. So choose a target market that you know well, gender, age, location, industry, hobbies, and think about what makes them tick. So let's say referring back to, these are the goals that I have for a blog. And then the target market that I have is that I want to reach women that are over 50 on the West Coast, that they have a personal interest or a career in marketing, and that they're technologically curious or savvy, right? And that's kind of the audience that we're talking to tonight. So this is like if I was brainstorming my own blog. But I've had a music blog before, for example, because I'm a big music fan, something I can speak to. Exercise, so who's Google's audience? Who's their business audience? And who's their blog audience? And how do those overlap? Now, Google is very utilitarian right now, but that who was it in the beginning, and who is their blog trying to speak to, and what are they trying to put out there? So this is kind of a crazy image I just put on the screen here. This is when I was doing some blogging for StumbleUpon, and StumbleUpon is a social media website, and one of the target audiences that we had were young males. And so we had a really cool story where somebody put a screenplay that they wrote onto our website, onto our social media website, and a producer discovered the screenplay, and it became a motion picture, like a Hollywood motion picture, a couple of years ago, and we were so excited about it. And that we could have put up a blog post that was really boasting about how great StumbleUpon is, right? Like, oh, we are so cool. Look at this thing that happened. Pat ourselves on the back, move on, right? But that we chose a different approach, which is we're reaching young males, and are they going to care about us just bragging about ourselves? No, they're going to pass over that. How do we make it user-centric? So we put up something that was relatable and relevant to them, and tried to entice them with an, are you ready for the zombie apocalypse? And put up an image that they could relate to, a young man who was the star of this movie, and then mentioned throughout the blog post like things that they could learn about if they were surviving the zombie apocalypse, with links back to our website. But then we also promoted the movie within that blog post, and therefore also kind of promoting ourselves and telling the story of how that happened. So then also what you want to do in part of these first steps is outline what else is out there. So do your research of other blogs, find out what you like, what you don't like. I've put some social media sites to consider beyond Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, the standard ones. Gold mines of bloggers on Pinterest, StumbleUpon, and Tumblr. And then you can also just Google it, blog plus marketing, blog plus music. And then when you find some of these other blogs, they'll usually have links to blogs that they like or they work with and they partner with, and that can help you then kind of go down an investigatory path of here are some other blogs that are related, and I'm going to learn from them too. And then outline what's realistically possible. So don't overestimate what you can do. Blogging, you could blog all day long every day. But think about what's realistic. So probably an hour or so writing once you already have some content ideas, when you actually know what you're going to write about, depending on how in-depth that piece needs to be. But blogs, again, are meant to be more short editorial pieces, not super in-depth journalism, though you can certainly have interesting insights. And then an hour or so posting, promoting, tracking how it's doing a week. Then also, towards the beginning, just take a few minutes to brainstorm content ideas. This is not to say that this will be your final editorial calendar, so much as to say, do you have enough to write about and enough to say about those topics if you just brainstormed for a little while? And if not, if you find yourself kind of stalling after just a couple, then consider expanding your audience or reconsider your strategy or your angle a little bit, and that little nudge might open up a lot more doors and possibilities. And then also, you can consider starting your own blog, right? Or you can consider writing for others on other blogs, which is called guest blogging, and we'll get a little bit more into guest blogging. So do's and don'ts, deciding what to write. So do create a list of post ideas. So you kind of, you went through that initial exercise of here's some quick ideas off the top of my head. and that will help you determine if you're kind of going in the right direction. But once you feel like you're in a good place, then start to create a more solid list of post ideas and prioritize ones that you think will have the most impact in regards to speaking to your target audience. You can consider making an editorial calendar and with a variety of different angles for the content. So people love lists. That's one of the reasons why I chose the 5 do's and don'ts of blog-based marketing for this topic. And photos and visuals, people love photos, visuals, makes it way easier to follow the content that you're writing about. And also speaking to current events like the Google blog. And holidays are a great thing to inspire content. Don't stray from your core theme when deciding what to write. Remember your audience that you originally outlined, okay? Because you can go off into another world sometimes with content, and that if you only are dedicating a certain amount of time per week and really want to get the most ROI out of your blog, then be really as focused as you can be. And that if you're going to write to personal stories, I think, and the reason I brought up this personal stories point, just for a little bit of context, is that I think people have a perception of a blog is kind of like a Twitter or Facebook where I'm just going to put up personal notes and stories about what I did today. Why would anybody be interested in reading what I'm thinking about? And that's certainly, it's not the way to think about it. Blogs can be really powerful and interesting. And so thinking through, let's say it's Thanksgiving and you were thinking, okay, well, I'll just put up a blog post about how lovely my Thanksgiving was and what we ate at Thanksgiving, and here's some pictures of my grandchildren, right? And that's not user-centric. That's not customer-centric. Think about how can I take this personal story that I have and make it something they can learn from. So how to balance holiday planning and work. And then you can put in pictures of your grandchildren. You can do interesting things there. You can have it and a personal story alongside it, but they're going to want to click on how to balance holiday planning and work, and you're not going to see a lot of conversion on the Thanksgiving memories. So here's an example of it. It kind of broke out there with the Stumble Upon dinner party how-to. So we have this dinner party contest at Stumble Upon, and there you can see here in the middle that there's pretty intense instructions for explaining how to enter this contest, but I broke up the post with a series of photos because I could have made it totally text-based, but that I had tons of pictures of like me and my friends with different, engaging with the food. I took a picture of the list as to how we were planning versus saying, make a plan and, assign a thing to each person and everything. Like by having that visual with it of the actual list, it made it a lot easier to skim and engage with. And then once people were engaged, they'd be more willing to read the contest details. So number 4, do's and don'ts. Start out as a guest blogger. So I mentioned guest blogging earlier in the presentation. Writing as a guest blogger. So that means that you are basically writing posts for other bloggers and that your post would go on their blog. You would get the credit for that piece. And the reason I'm suggesting it is because starting from zero is tough. And by reaching out and working with somebody that already has a readership, already has been in this game for a little bit, then you can kind of capitalize on that. And that meanwhile, they're busy too. They usually really appreciate it when somebody comes to them with a really great idea that's an expert in a field and says, I'd love to write a piece for you. They think, great, I got a week off, awesome. And my readers will still be engaged. I won't have a stale blog, right? And you can learn from what you do on their blogs before maybe writing your own and seeing if it's something that you really want. So in starting out as a guest blogger, what you would do is reach out to bloggers that reach your target audience. So part of that initial research phase can help you identify some bloggers to initially reach out to. And I have some notes here as to how you can reach out. And then I also have in the addendum some tips for reaching out. And so we're going to share out this presentation so that you can read the addendum on your own time and sort of copy and paste what you need in terms. I have some messaging templates and things like that. And then those bloggers will help promote your post to their networks that they've already established. And I'm a guest blogger. I've been a guest blogger before, so I wrote a piece on making homemade dog food for a site that has a pet activity and tracking device, and it brings in traffic from people that are searching for homemade dog food, right? And they wouldn't have a place to put homemade dog food content on their business website. It wouldn't make any sense, but it's related enough, and it drives traffic to the blog, to the website in a new and unique way that wouldn't have otherwise happened just on their standalone site. And then I use guest bloggers. On Coursera, we frequently have professors writing for us. And so this Ohio State University professor, she teaches a course on human trafficking, and she's an expert in it. She has books on it, right? She's one of the foremost thought leaders in the country on human trafficking, and her words and her passion is going to come through where it could not necessarily come through if somebody else was writing it. And so that's to the point of, that a blogger can appreciate you coming and saying, I am an expert in this, I have a passion for this, I want to write for you. But don't come empty-handed or with too high of expectations or control. Present a couple ideas, be upfront about what you can deliver. I can deliver a piece about this many words by this date, and remember that you're writing for free. Don't expect to be paid. And be open to other content ideas. They might have some tweaks for it, or they might want to brainstorm with you. And know that they might edit your content. They shouldn't do any major drastic changes, but they could do some tweaking to the copywriting-esque portion of that, and just be sure you're comfortable with that. Final do and don't. Number 5, promote yourself. So you got to put your blog posts out there if you want people to know that they're there. So share them on social media, use hashtags. I won't go into the details of social media best practices. Hopefully that's another tech talk. But you should follow those social media best practices in regards to promoting these posts. And then be sure to at the blog that you wrote for. And then, because you want to give credit where it's due, you want to have that good relationship with the blogger that you're working with, and ask the blogger how they plan to promote that post as well. And then email it out to your friends, family, and your various networks, and ask people to share it too. But don't spam people. So when emailing out your post, I would suggest targeting to the people that you're asking to share it. So if you have a women-centric post on here are the best career advancement tips, let's say, for women, ask the professional women in your network, or just women in general, to share it. Versus if you had a thought leadership piece that's more specific to your industry, ask your colleagues to share it, right? They're just going to be more likely to do it, and then you can ping them more frequently with things they're going to do versus them all promoting your very first one because they're excited for you and then not doing it after that. Because how many times is somebody that has nothing to do with marketing in their day-to-day life going to want to promote your marketing blog post? You know what I mean? And then also be a thought leader on social media. So consider posting pieces from other blogs and publications so that your feed isn't just a stream of your blog posts. It just makes people more interested in following you because you're not self-promoting. You're trying to say, I know what I'm talking about. My blog knows what it's talking about, but here's some other interesting information that's related. So next steps, research blogs, outline your goals and audience, decide what you want to write about, and then reach out to a few bloggers to guest blog. That will get the ball rolling. And then you can think through, do I want to start my own blog? And maybe that would be another talk that I should do around actually starting your own blog. But if you do decide to start your own blog, I would suggest considering Tumblr to host your blog. I think it's one of the easier platforms to get started with. So in summary, blogging is about branding, and that I would start writing for others first, guest blogging, Be sure to share your posts and have fun with it. All right, that's it. So, time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? You want to unmute or put it in the chat window here. Has anyone tried blogging before? And had any tips for anybody? How do you contact bloggers? All right, we got a good question here. And in fact, I'm going to write down some of these questions in the...
Would you consider just writing on the Facebook is a blogging?
No, I don't actually. So here, I'm just going to really quick to put in here. That's a good question, though. I'm first going to just really quick, we got a question on how to contact bloggers. So in one of the slides, I mentioned that you can usually find their email address on their blog. And then if you can't find their email address on their blog, then look to their social media accounts, which you can usually Google, or usually on their blog, they'll have plenty of links to their social media accounts through which then you can message them. There's also blogger networks. So in the addendum, I'll have some blogger networks that you can consider joining, and they have ways to message bloggers and forums through which you can connect with people. Those would be the main ways that I would consider. So first I would do email, then try social media. But if you want to really get into it, blogger networks are a great resource. And as mentioned, I have that more detail so consider a guest blogger reaching out. And then in the addendum, when we send this out, I have some information on like a suggested outreach, so a suggested little template that you could potentially copy and paste and rework to what your needs are around, hi, name, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and I'm writing out to talk to you about guest blogging for you, and here's an idea I have, and let's chat. Is basically the gist of it. And then I would consider putting in a URL to something like your LinkedIn or your Twitter or your Facebook, and we'll talk about Facebook next, so that they know you're a real human being and they can do a little bit of research about you and see how impressive you are. Or maybe your business website as well. So did that sound like a good answer? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. If you have any follow-up questions, let's get into that. So the next question was, it was a great question. Is this Priya's mom? About Facebook?
Yeah, this is Priya's dad. The one I asked you about writing on Facebook, is it a blogging? But you answered my question.
Yes. Okay. So is Facebook blogging? This is a great question. So there's been a lot of buzz in the industry around Twitter being a microblogging site. And that means basically, instead of a short post that has a little bit, a short post that has more depth on like your traditional blog, Twitter is seen as microblogging, which is a wee little tidbit type of blog, just a thought of a blog. Facebook is more of and in my opinion, and like kind of what it's seen as in the industry, is more of a channel to share the content of your blog, mostly because Facebook doesn't have the capacity or the functionality to really present the information well, if that makes sense. So if you were like, when people are like, if you think about how Google did their post on data from searches, if they had put, it would be hard to present that information as cleanly and as beautifully and as easy to read on Facebook. They could have potentially put up a photo and maybe a caption on the photo next to the graph, but but otherwise, yeah, Facebook just doesn't have the platform like some of the other websites. Like I suggested, Tumblr is a blogging platform. It's meant for blogging, and then use Facebook to promote it. All right. Any other questions? Love these questions so far. Really good ones. Let's see. Okay, so similar to the Facebook question, what about Instagram? Is it best to integrate those accounts on the blog? That is I'm a big Instagram fan, and the only issue I have with Instagram and promoting your business is that you can't put in a link to your site on there. You can put in a link in the comment, but it doesn't. The user of Instagram can't press that URL and then be taken to your website. And I wish they would change that functionality. Now, if you could maybe do some sort of hashtag that's always associated with your business that you could then use across your social media channels, maybe there's a better chance of them using that hashtag more often. Instagram is a great way with things like hashtags and adding when people, let's say, take a picture of using your product to see and get to see what people are doing with your product, and that is actually great fodder or great content to then put on your blog. So you could use your Instagram as a content source to say, okay, I have this account on Instagram that's my business account or my brand account, and I put up pictures. It's almost like you're putting up pictures as like a mini blog, like a visual blog, if you will. It's micro blogging with photos, so it's kind of like Twitter more than Facebook in that way, and that you could have a consistent hashtag with your brand that when people follow you on Instagram, they get familiar with your hashtag. And then you could encourage your followers to use that hashtag on Instagram, and then you can see how people are engaging with your products. And then that would be really cool to then take over to a blog, take screenshots of it, and then promote that on your Facebook, Twitter type channels. So that is a really great question, and I would use Instagram if you have a pretty visually based business as well, or brand. And again, remember that you want to remember your audience. So great that you have pictures of the grandkids, but if you could have the grandkids using your product, or like grandkids helping you with cooking at Thanksgiving, which is related to helping career women balance, holiday planning and work. Again, tie it back to something they can learn, and then put a tip in those comments so that they're learning something from the Instagram rather than just seeing an image that they can't really take anything away from. It's not going to have the same emotional attachment. Yeah, we got Tech Talk for Seniors hashtag. So, Instagram. Is there anyone here that isn't on Instagram but that's thought about getting on it? So most people, I think, probably are on Instagram. That was a really good question. Hopefully that gave you some ideas. But I'll put down in the answers here some of the more tangible tips that I put in there. So, And I would suggest just choosing one hashtag to use consistently, and then meanwhile using other hashtags just to associate with different words, so that when people are searching for, let's say if I was writing for my indie music blog, I would hashtag the group name or at the group name, so that when people were searching for that group, they found my post, but that I had my blog or brand hashtag in that image as well, so that when people are saying, I am listening to this album because Currin recommended it, hashtag Currin's favorite, so that they're always using that.